able to offer some teaching today, and I had hoped that we'd have a full house. So Reb Baer can't make it because the car isn't available, and so I told you the whole list of all the other people, and I guess the ones who come from Denver or from that part won't be coming because of the weather. So
I would still I would still say something if you'd
please,
like me to.
Please, come and sit here so you can
I thought of this in the middle of the night.
Good. So it's not good to be pregnant with a thought that you can't express. And the ducks fit your feet nicely.
I know. Where else can I wear these?
All right, sit. Okay, this way he can get you on the camera easier too.
Okay.
I just want to say I listened to both the recording, the sound recording, and the meditation, and wonderful stuff there. And there's a man who has asked me about Shiviti gazing, so I'll let him borrow that recording about the breath and all that stuff because it will help him do that.
Mm-hmm, right.
So, yashikoach for what you've done, okay?
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
Who is this?
Hi.
How are you?
Bless you. Now, you going to sit on the floor again? You know each other?
No.
All right. So introduce yourself. Go ahead.
I'm Mark.
Mark.
Marc
Mindy.
Soloway and Mindy.
And I'm Mindy. There was a
Mindy.
TV show, Mark and Mindy. I never saw it, but
Took place in Boulder.
It took place in Boulder.
It did.
It was
Okay.
Walk, not Mark.
So,
Okay.
so Rabbi Mindy is going to share with us some Torah, and then we'll look at Ezra a little bit
Oh, good.
today because Bahir and Victor and Nadia and Tirza can't make it today, so
Yeah. That'd be great because I've got to give 3 Divrei Torah and I haven't really had a time to think about what I'm going to talk about.
okay. So I wanted to share a story that I heard from Reb Shlomo, and I dedicate this to Reb Zalman. And it's a story about the Volker Rebbe. The Volker Rebbe was known as the silent Rebbe because he rarely spoke. And it was said that he would sit with his Hasidim for 12 hours a day in silence. And at the end of the sitting, he would say, Hashem Echad, God is one. So the Rebbe had a disciple in a nearby town, and he very much wanted the rabbi of the town to meet his Rebbe. And the rabbi resisted all the invitations, thinking to himself, why should I go travel a distance to see someone who doesn't talk? If he knew something, he would talk. He might be good for the simple Hasidim, but I am an educated person. I'm a rabbi. I'm a Kabbalist. Why should I go? And finally, he agreed. And he arrived before Shabbos, and he saw that the simple Hasidim were learning Eitz Chaim, and they were discussing it in a way that was beyond his comprehension. He was immediately humbled. And he said this to the disciple, who told him, next to our Rebbe, we know nothing. So he went there for Shabbos, and on Friday night, after davening, everybody would be in a line to say Good Shabbos to the Rebbe. And he was in line, and when it was his turn, the Rebbe took his hand. The Rebbe didn't speak, but if you were lucky, he would take your hand. After this, the disciple went to try to find the rabbi, and he saw that he was in the corner crying. And he asked him, "What happened to you when the Rebbe held your hand?" And the rabbi responded and said, "I always thought that I believed in God. But after the Rebbe held my hand, I recognized that it wasn't real. But now I know that there is one God." So this is like my favorite story about meditation, my favorite story about a Rebbe and the teaching of giving over that a Rebbe can do, and most importantly, about the importance and the distinction between knowing from direct experience and believing because this is what you've been taught to believe, but it's not personal and direct. And it's also an important story because I feel that the most important concepts of Judaism cannot be understood directly, but only through meditation and prayer do gates open for us that we can know this. I'll share with you, Reb Zalman, one time when I went to Shlomo in the very, very beginning, he would say, "God is God. God is one. It's blowing my mind." And I remember I thought, what's the big deal? God is God, okay. God is one. But then in meditation, I realized, he wasn't talking about that. He was in that experience of that revelation of God. And I realized that this story is very important in relation to the Parsha of this week, of the giving over of the 10 Commandments. And the first commandment, as we know, is a statement of God revelation, hardly a commandment. I am Yud Kei Vav Kei, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of that place of bondage. So it's very different than the other commandments that are do this, don't do this. This was a statement of God wanting to impart a very direct experience, wanting us to have a very personal relationship. The sages ask, well, why didn't God just introduce him and say, "I am the creator of the universe," rather than the way that he did? And it said that people would probably tend to have a very abstract, it wouldn't be conception of God, it wouldn't be the same kind of personal God that you can call out to, the God that is willing to enter into your places of constraint and with compassion lift you out of that limiting bondage state. So this is the foundation of Judaism, the foundation of all the commandments. And so this was the first thing that Hashem had to say to us.
Hey, Yasher Koach. Thank you. Yesterday, Netanel was here, and he brought me something that I had translated some years ago, and which we're going to be doing something with. And it's Reb Shalom Dov Baer of Lubavitch on Simchas Torah giving a table talk. It's so interesting that until I found that Martin Luther had table talks that were published, I didn't know that other people also did these sihot, bamtish. Yeah. So here's what the Rebbe says. Today an idea set itself right with me. Seemingly one teaches Chassidus, and despite the fact that you accept it, he's saying to his Chassidim, you're not aroused or moved by it, as if this discourse served no purpose, as if it filled no wants. And then one has to tell the listener, allow yourself to be affected. But there was a time when things were different, times gone by. Every discourse was absorbed, especially the one fully and clearly, when one fully and clearly understood it. They were able to do something with it. For it's impossible that there should be a Hasidic discourse in which one doesn't find anything speaking to one's own condition, and from which one wouldn't be able to derive something useful. So in days gone by, with every Hasidic discourse, with every divine intent idea, one was able to daven. At first one meditated on it, then one became stirred. Yet nowadays, while in general people are devoted to the conceptual understanding of Hasidic intellection, he's called it the Haskalah of Hasidus, they rarely absorb the idea. In no way does it touch them in their serving and in their worship. And thus, generally, we see that although there are some who do apply themselves to davening out of meditation and who become affected, mostly there are those who will understand things, but they have no merchandise when it comes to davening. They don't have schoire, you can hear that. And today I realized that even Moshe, our master, peace be upon him, when he spoke words which alone ought to have been able to arouse Israel from lethargy, yet the people were not affected by his words until Moshe ordered them, underscored, Simu levavchem, set your hearts to these words. Allow yourself to become affected. Thus, when I realized that even in Moshe's generation things happened in this manner, I found a possible plea of merit for our generation. If Moshe had to tell his generation, known as the generation of knowledge, the Dor Deah, that they must take heed and set their hearts being moved by his words, how much more so in this generation. But to tell the truth, despite the plea I made for this generation, I'm still disappointed. Nowadays, when one says, let yourself become affected, one expects people to become affected, but it still doesn't work. Then he says something amazing. Generally, Hasidic intellection takes its roots from the Rebbe's imprisonment in Petersburg. One must realize how much of an eclipse Petersburg was to the light of Hasidism. Before Petersburg, people used to be affected by the Rebbe's discourses. This generally means that in the discourses the very absolute essence of the light of Hasidism radiated, whereas after Petersburg, intellection began, and intellection generally eclipses the light. So I want to spend some time spelling this out. When you see how many times we have good ideas, and the ideas don't become affect. What happens at that point is that people treat it as a nice idea, a nice chap. I once gave a lecture in Baltimore, and it turns out it was a chaver of mine who wanted me to give the lecture. He was a Chabad person who was a Rav in a Misnagdische shul, where before him a German Rabbi Schwab, sort of very much like Papa Karlebach, was the rabbi, and then comes this Chabad person to be the rabbi. So he asked me to give this lecture, and I had given a lecture in those days about what I call Jewing. I Jew, you Jew, he, she, it Jews. I think I've done it a number of times, but let me spell it out because it's going to be useful for you. When somebody says, how am I going to be a good Jew? You know, I'm a good Jew, I'm a good Jew. And then you ask, how do they define good Jew? With a definition that should include themselves. Always, right? And then you say, well, what is a good Jew? And so then somebody says, person who goes to shul all the time, da 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 da. Then somebody pipes up and says, yeah, I know those guys who go to shul, they're ganovim, they're this, they're that, they're slumlords. And they come up with all the indictments for the people.
Abramov goes to shul. Huh? Abramov goes to shul a lot, I think.
So are you okay with your back?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just don't want you to have the pain in your back because you don't look so comfortable. So, so then people come to the equation. The more you go to shul, the more you're a ganav, you know. So then you say, but what's a good Jew? And that's always what creates problems. So I point out that if you use the word Jew as a noun, you run into trouble. Because if you use it as a noun, it depends what nouns there are on the other hoppers. If it says Catholic, Protestant, then I know what you mean by Jew. If it says Russian, Pole, then I know what you mean by Jew. If it says Caucasian, white, and then Jew, I know what you mean by Jew. Either race or religion or nationality. But nobody defines himself by a label that somebody else gives him that helps him sort things. So then you hear people say, but, you know, I'm Jewish. So from this you get the following. Jewish, Jewisher, and Jewishist. Jewish is Reformed, Jewisher is Conservative, Jewishist is Orthodox, right? You get that. That's also nonsense. So I like to use the word Jew as a verb. I Jew, you Jew, he, she, it Jews. Then the question is, who is a good Jew? The one who Jews more often. You know, then I have an index, you know, a parameter. This one Jews more often than you, he's a better Jew. You say, but yeah, I've watched him Jew. He Jews with just 1 milliwatt, you know. But when I Jew, even 3 times a year, I Jew with such gesund, you know. So now I have frequency over intensity, right? But then, over what range of life do you Jew? You only Jew in shul or you only Jew at home, but what about in business and the world? So I have to have a third axis, which is over what range of life do you Jew? Then someone comes along and says, yeah, but you can also program a robot to do all these things. With how much intentionality do you Jew? So now you have those 4 dimensions of frequency, intensity, you know, intentionality, and over what range of life do you Jew? So that's why I like to have that notion as a verb. And how did I get to that? From where did I go? From what he's saying. Yeah, the issue is how to be affected by it, you know. Do I let it in and is it affecting me? And very often the haskalah, the idea alone doesn't do it. So then he says the Rebbe was imprisoned in Petersburg, and you are the easiest to get up. Would you please go, the tissues that you used yesterday, I could use the box, thank you. So, what happens is that once I go conceptual, you have to work with the concept. But imagine if somebody spoke, yeah. All right, Thank you, thank you. It's all right. Here we are using this. I just don't want to be so funny. So, there is a way in which I describe this someplace, and it's called situational thinking. Professor Heschel used to use that word, situational thinking. In Chassidus, you call it adata de nafshe. Adata de nafshe. He's learning this for himself. You know, he's not learning this as an idea, but to use himself. And in a fancy way today, you're going to say it is a participatory epistemology, you know. What you know is not something that's extra to you, but you participate in what you know. So two mishalim I give for that. One is a friend of yours who is doing medical research is inviting you to come and look through the microscope. And he shows you a slide of healthy tissue, and then shows you a slide of cancerous tissue. And he explains to you how he dyed them and how you see the difference between them and so on and so forth. And at this point, we are still very much conceptual in the haskalah of it. But then he says, and last week's biopsy is on this slide, and he shows you the cancerous slide again. See what happens. Right away, there's an emotional impact because you're involved in that. Same situation if somebody says, what would you do if you win $1 million? And you tell all the nice things that you want to say, and then you finally say, well, you have won, your ticket has won it. What a difference it makes because it is self-referring. They tell a funny story about a man who had a weak heart, and they wanted to inform him that he won the lottery. So they asked the Rav to come and tell him that he won the lottery. So he begins slowly and so on. So what would you do if you won the lottery? He says, I would give half of it to you, and the rabbi faints. On the other hand, they tell this story about one of the Hasidic people who was a rich man, and then some trouble happened, you know, like ships went down, and a shipment was robbed and stuff like that. Job's tiding. And so they want to tell him about this. So they say, how would you interpret what the Chachamim say, Keshem shemavorchim al hatov, kach mevorchim al hara? So he gives him a whole long shmuz about him. Then they tell him the thing, and he faints away. Okay. All of which goes to show what it means if the thing is direct. So he says that before Petersburg, when you had short sayings, you didn't need to have long Geschäften there. And that's all that was necessary. There was a Roman Catholic saint, Saint Jean Vianney was his name. He was known as the Curé d'Ars. He was in France. He barely made it through to become a priest. He could handle one mass in Latin, and Kamitsuris, they ordained him. He was a very posheta person, but he was one of the greatest spiritual directors and wonderful discerner of things. So his sermons used to be like this. God says, thou shalt not lie. Lie, oi, lie, and lie. And would start crying. How we are liars, and we just cry. And that was a sermon, you know, because it was so real and so direct. So when you look for Aseret HaDibrot, you want to say, if you're going to Haskalah, why did God say it this way? Why did He say it that way? And the Kuzari raises, the king of the Chazars, asked the Chacham there, why does God introduce himself Asher Hotzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim and not that he created Shamayim V'Aretz? And he says, because Shamayim V'Aretz, he would have had a claim for the whole world. But this is a claim to us, saying, I have done this for you, and so therefore it goes very specific. And therefore the response is, again, it's not somebody else's meant, it's we who are meant. So I just wanted to share these things. Allow yourself to be affected. Can you imagine if you were to say this at the beginning of your Dvar Torah in Shul? Allow yourself to be affected. I like that phrase so much. Yeah. So I was looking at Ibn Ezra because whenever I find him saying, making a big deal, you know. So it's in Perek Chaf. So he begins, Vaydaber Elokim, Yesh she'elot kashot beparsha hazot. Amru Rabim, ki ashnayim advarim levadam amar Hashem, ve'edutam shekatuv, b'dibur rishon ani, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, b'shniya ki Anochi Hashem Elokecha ki Elchana, b'shlishi. He's already talking about God in the third person. Have you found that piece in the Ibn Ezra?
I'm trying to find it.
It's on
What's the
Pasuk
Dibur
Vaydaber
Matchil?
Elokim Perek Chaf.
What's the Dibur Matchil?
Pardon?
What is the Dibur Matchil?
It's on Vaydaber Elokim.
I was only on there.
It's that big. Don't see it?
Odd low.
Huh? All right.
Sorry, Karen.
Huh?
Karen.
Okay. So he said, Gam asher yisa et shemo lashav velo amar shemi ubervi sheshet yamim asa Hashem and not asiti. So from which we derive that the first two dibrot were spoken by Hashem and the rest of it was spoken by Moshe. So he goes through a number of questions here, and then he says, "V'zeh davar kashem mikol hakushiyot an zachor v'shamor." Why is it? Why do you is there a change? Shayu lanu kasher afarish. V'chalila chalila she'omer shelo divo nechona ki datenu nikla keneged datam. If the Chachamim said that he said them b'dibur echad, how could we claim that we understand things better than they did? רק אנשי דורנו יחשבו כי דבריהם כמשמעם ואיננה כן, כאשר הפרש בסוף אחר שאזכיר הקושיות. So now he goes with the questions. ובאחרון הפרש על דרך הישרה להסיר כל הקושיות והשאלות שבפרשה הזאת, ולא ייתכן שיאמר זכור ושמור בבת אחת רק במעשה נס. והנה נודע כי גם כאן יש לשאול למה לא נכתב בראשון הזכור ושמור גם כן בשנייה. Could have said זכור ושמור את יום השבת לקדשו, and not giving it the other way. והנה מה נעשה באותם הפסוקים, אם נאמרו בבת אחת כמו זכור ושמור, למה לא הזכירו זה חז"ל? כי יותר יש לדמוע איך נאמרו במעשה נס פסוקים רבים בבת אחת ואין טעמם שווה. כמו שתי מילות שטעמם אחד ושווה שתהיינה נאמרות בבת אחת. So, I'm going to leave the questions at this point. Then later on he says, Amar Avraham Baer. Do you see the next piece where he begins with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll go with that in a moment. So I just want to raise with you some of the questions. What is it that you have heard that people have been saying, that you have been thinking about, what's going on with the Aseret HaDibrot? You know? Some of the Chachamim have said that God only said Anochi. Some of them have said that he only said the Aleph of Anochi. Some of them said Aleph Anochi with a kamatz. Some of them have said even without a kamatz. So you have the sense of that kind of silent thing. And the other question is, of course, did Hashem speak in a baritone voice or in a tenor voice or whichever voice he spoke? So in the notion that the primitive notion that people have, that Moshe Rabbeinu, God is saying, bring your steno pad and sit on my lap and write down Bet, Reish, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Tav, you know, and he gives him the thing like this. So most people, when you talk sometimes to some nouveau frum people, that's really how they see it. That there's a direct dictation, Moshe Rabbeinu is writing it down. The Rambam has a beautiful, beautiful picture of that. And you can see how this is a beautiful holy fiction. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu God gives Moshe Rabbeinu a shtickle Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu calls Aaron over and says, here is what Hashem said, and he repeats verbatim what Hashem said. Then he calls his two sons over and repeats again. Then he calls the elders over and repeats again in front of them. Excuse me. And then he calls Kol Yisrael and repeats it again, and everybody has heard it. Now, he has said it 5 times. Then Moshe Rabbeinu goes away, and Aaron repeats it. And then the two sons repeat it. And then the elders repeat it, so that in the end everybody has heard it 5 times. Now, I can't imagine that that's the way it happened, but it's a very good way of saying, you know, how else would you explain it to people, how verbatim the thing is to be understood. If you go and ask the question, does Hashem need to activate air in order to send sound to ears, which is a clumsy way for imparting information when he could create that, you know, Hanot ha'ozen halo yishmaim yotzayim lo yabit hamlamet adam da'at, you know, if the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us consciousness, he could impress it directly in the consciousness. And by the way, that's what most of the people are saying was happening. So how do you deal with that question about the first 2 commandments and the rest of them, and what have been your thoughts about that?
Well, one way of looking at it is that if the first statement sinks in and is accepted fully, then everything else follows automatically. It's like a consequence. It's not a separate commandment, but rather that kind of acceptance of the unity of God, and that's the only thing that we can worship, rather than anything like the bondage in Egypt, our narrow concept of life, then automatically we'll not kill and steal and, you know, do all those things, and we will respect the older generation, and we'll want to set aside a time every week to go inward. That kind of follows from the first, which would then, you know, it wouldn't be a commandment, it would be what we would want to do, what we would automatically want to do.
A lot depends then on what the people hear. You know, it's like, imagine if there is a voice that comes out from, how would I say, from the central intelligence of the cosmos, which says God wants the heart. And you happen to be an Aztec, and then you figure that what you have to do is cut out the living heart from people and offer that to God, which is how they hear it. So the problem is also when you say Dibra Torah Bilshon B'nei Adam, because these are the things that follow from that klal of all the klalim, Anochi Hashem Rekecha, then it depends a great deal what people have in their moral inventory, how they hear that. So what more would you say?
I have a totally different take on this. We came out of Egypt 430 years. Egypt had many gods. It was living in the land of the archetypes. And here we're freed and we're given Torah. And this first glimpse of God saying, I am your God, is raising our consciousness beyond the archetypical level to the level of pure consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the evolution of human consciousness where God is saying, go higher. And everything else comes from that.
So go higher. You see where we are right now with people screaming Allahu Akbar, and they're doing all kinds of things with that. So it depends on the matrix that receives it.
Exactly. So the matrix has to be purified. There's the differentiation between the ego self and the pure node of consciousness that can receive higher consciousness, resonate with it, and live to its destiny.
So for this reason, we have to count Sphira and prepare ourselves to Matan Torah and so on and so forth. That's part of the thing. The other part is that Posca Zahu Matan. You get a sense that a description is that at the Gan Eden, Hitil Bahem Hanachash, that there was this impurity that came from the serpent at that point, and it didn't get removed until Har Sinai, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to hear it right either. Okay, let's hear some more.
I mean, I was always struck by Rosenzweig's statement that when it says, V'yadaber Elohim, that's Matan Torah, that's the revelation, and everything else that follows is interpretation. And that there's something about the energy of that moment at Sinai that was so captivating, and the specifics of it are kind of difficult to grasp, and we just have like this version of it. I've been thinking a lot about 2 and 3 as what they really say. I mean, I think we don't. The whole idea of I mean, my sister is a sculptor. She makes beautiful sculptures. Sometimes in her images there are human images, and it's like I can't accept that that's what this is really talking about.
That you shouldn't make such images.
Right, and the whole geschäft in the world now with these cartoons of Muhammad, it's the same kind of idea. It's like what's really being. I mean, it's so much deeper. It's like it's so easy to just take these concepts in such a superficial way, but what it's really about. I mean, the reaction to those cartoons has been, in my view, an absolute form of kind of avodah zarah. It's like taking this thing so literally and then acting out in this way that is just bringing exactly the energy that they're afraid, that they're claiming not to be a part of.
What the cartoon is pointing to is what they're actually doing.
Well, exactly.
And so their protest against it only points to the truth of the cartoon.
Well, exactly.
Right, no irony there.
Right. There's no sense of the irony of it at all. But it's like, to me, the whole idea of, I mean, this is in a way the kind of the foundation of the concept of avodah zarah, beklal, and like I've been to Buddhist temples, and I don't find like these things can be I think of the iconography of the Orthodox Church. These are images that are meant to inspire us to transcend to a higher place. The image itself is not an idol, it's something that's transcendent. And so when we get so caught up in the halacha, we can't have any images of this, we can't have any images. That's the avodah zarah, is getting caught on the idea rather than seeing the idea as being about being, anything. I think anything, it's like the kotel. The kotel is like, for many people, it's an idol, totally an idol. Yeah. But it has the potential to be more of an icon. That's just something that can inspire an experience to go higher. And anything that becomes the object, and I just get stuck on this because I think for many people in the conservative movement and the Orthodox movement, whatever, or anywhere, but it's just like halacha itself can become the pesel. We get so fixated with the details of the halacha that we're forgetting that the ultimate statement here is that an opportunity to connect. And if we're getting caught in these details, we're not connecting at all. We're just losing ourselves in something else.
That's where people keep pointing out, you point with a finger to the moon. Don't look at the finger.
Right.
Right? So an icon is like the finger, and the image is like a finger. I want to tell you an experience I had in Frankfurt am Main. There's a church in Frankfurt am Main where the German emperors were crowned. And it's a big cathedral. And in there is a sandstone Pieta. Mary holding her dead son with a broken body on her lap and grieving. And I stood there and I started to cry. And it was precisely what this is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
In a non-literary culture, to take people and show them the stations of the cross and see this is what your Savior suffered, and so on and so forth, is to take him through, to give him the equivalent of what's his name did with the Passion,
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, to have 14 pictures of that, and so on. But that's like the finger pointing beyond itself. So, yeah, at the same time, when you look at the way in which fertility cults were, and that's what they're fighting,
Well, right. That's what they're fighting. But for us as modern Jews to point the finger at, Hinduism or Buddhism or I don't know as much about those religions as you do, but I think behind most religions there is the sense of one God, and these things are part of what can inspire us to reach that transcendence. And to talk about Christianity as avodah zarah and having this kind of element to see these incredible icons with these sparkling eyes of Jesus that are just meant to just enter our soul so that we can connect to God. I find it inspiring. I don't find it idolatry at all.
It's how you interpret it. It seems to me that the whole concretizing of whatever you're reading and of the words instead of understanding the real meaning, and then you can ridicule anything, you can define anything as idol worship because you don't understand it. And I think, Reb Zalman, you've said many times that the highest level person in every religion has more in common than that person might have with someone who thinks this way, that interprets everything very concretely and doesn't see the bigger picture.
There was a Rav in the 13th century, I think, I forgot his name now. He was an enemy of Kabbalah. And his argument was that you guys, we have one God, you made 10 gods out of that. And when I wrote a minor paper for my doctorate, it was on the Kabbalistic prayer intentions in the Amida, talking about why the Shemot have different nekudot according to the Sphira. So again, are you addressing 10 different gods, or so on and so forth? So once I had a conversation with Thomas Merton, and I asked him, would you tell me, what do you mean by Trinity? By the Trinity. So he said, the Greek fathers talk about it the following way. God as the creator is the father, because that's what fathering means, to engender. God the redeemer is the son. You know, when I say God redeems, I mean to speak. That's I use the word son for that. When I want to say God reveals, I use the word Holy Spirit for that. So I said, I'm asking that God creates, that God redeems, and you know, creation, revelation, redemption. We have it in the Davening, we have it in so many forms. I don't have any problem with that. And what you see is that when you make the surface tension high, which we needed to do at one point because there were people who were being, how would I say, forced to attend sermons in churches, you know. I remember stories about how they would put wax into the children's ears and cotton and so on, so that they shouldn't hear it. And there were some pictures, some copper engravings showing how Jews were forced to attend these kinds of things. So I can understand. We heard the story of Hannah and the 7 children, and that was so very clear how much we would want to go against Avodah Zarah.
I have a tangential
Yeah.
question.
Go.
That when I've been wondering how God got to be called Father rather than Mother, and I thought that perhaps it was a reaction to the polytheistic goddess-based religions that were prevalent at the time. But is there more of that, or something that you could speak
of?
of?
I think the first thing, you're right that we are dealing with a very strong reaction. And when you look at some of the dinim that we have, Lo tevash el gedi b'chalev imo, and some other things of that sort, you get to know that the fertility cult thing made people very anxious. When you have that you shouldn't bring to the Beis Hamikdash as a korban etnan zona and mechir kelev. So we learn from that if someone had given, remember Yehuda is supposed to give to Tamar a lamb, a sheep, and if that's one given to the Zona for having had contact with her about that, don't offer that on the altar. So some people have come out and pointed out that the word celibate comes from kelev, and that the male sacred prostitute was called a kelev in that way. So mechir kelev is what you pay him, and the same way as etnan zona is what you pay her. So the sense of then you see how strong the Avodah Zarah was, that you had the Venus of Millenberg, of Willenberg. You've seen those terracotta images, yeah?
Yeah.
Of big belly, big breast woman, and they have dug them up in various fields because that was a sign of fertility. So when the Chachamim come, they had, not the Chachamim, time from Moshe Rabbeinu on, they had a real struggle. At one point, there was a conflation between Baal and Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. And there are some vestiges left in the Tanakh of that. One of the vestiges is that Shaul HaMelech had two sons. One he calls Mipi Baal, and the other one he calls Ish Baal. But only in one place are they called by that name. The rest of the time is Mipi Boshet and Ish Boshet. Avodat Gilulim instead of Elilim, as if to say that Gilulim means shitballs, which is a way of putting a put down of that. So, as he says that they are, at one point he carves himself an idol, and the rest of it he cooks his supper with. Take the word psolet. Psolet is schmutz, yeah? But it means that which falls off from sculpting, from pesel making, right? So that's psolet, is that leftover of that. So you get the sense of all this that doesn't want to see this happen. On some higher levels, you have Elohei Masecha Lo Taselecha, a molten poured God. Don't make for yourself. Matechet, which is a word that we use for metal, comes from a verb of smelting. That which matechet is that which is smeltable and pouring into a form. So by the time it gets to Hasidus, they're saying Elohei Masecha Lo Taselecha. Don't make a god from pouring schnapps. Elohei Masecha Lo Taselecha. Mach sich nicht kein Gott von Gießen. Von Gießen, Masecha. So you see, on the other hand, what are the other vestiges that are difficult ones, such as Nisuch HaMayim? Some of those things we were able to get rid of and said that's Avodah Zarah, we don't do it. But in the Torah it doesn't say anything else about pouring water on the altar during Sukkot time. And yet, Simchat Beit HaShoeva and so on and so forth. And when you look at every time there is a simcha, then you can find in that simcha, like a Mardi Gras, some leftovers of those early things that couldn't completely be gotten rid of. Okay, so now we come back to the business of the mother. Okay, what's so beautiful is what you throw out through the door comes in through the window. So you have Torah is feminine, Shabbos is feminine, Shechina is feminine. All these are there. And when he says Shema beni Musar avicha v'al titosh Torah imecha, so he's talking about that feminine Torah that comes through. And that's why, for instance, we need to have a minyan, so we bring in the feminine, and there's an element of one is a papa, and one of the reasons they say that the kala has to walk around 7 times the chosn, and why we don't want the chosn to walk around 7 times the kala, is that males, if you are polygamous, if you take a look at the way in which Yaakov Avinu sent the present to Esau, he has fewer males and 10 females for each one, because that's where animal husbandry is about these things. That's why Kodeshim Kalim, the simple and easy sacrifices, were always of the male animals, which are the redundant population. They're not Ashtarot Tzonecha, they're not Me'ashrot et Baaleim, they don't have wombs. So you can always sacrifice them. But when it comes to an asham, to a chatat, then you have to have a female, which costs you something more than a male animal. It's interesting how these things show themselves. So,
but
go on.
Say more about the circling with the kala. So,
well, he's capable of having 7 wives. You know, so he's walking around all the time saying, I'm a husband for Sunday, I'm a husband for Monday, I'm a husband for all those days of the week.
But it says, I think it's Tzaddik HaKohen says that in Mashiach times it's going to change. That the Chatan will circle. And how I understand it is that,
The Kala will circle
The-
the Chatan.
well, now the Kala circles the
Yeah, the
Chatan,
Chatan, right.
but it will change and the Chatan
Right.
will circle the Kala.
Right.
And why is that? Because I think that the reason that the women circles the man is that the male energy is prominent in this world of asiyah, this world of action. And what I've taught some when I've counseled people, that the kala is for her not to feel that she's the moon circulating the sun, but feel this is a Shlomo Torah, that she's the one, she makes the protecting wall, she's his protector, and but the reason that it's going to change is because the feminine energy is going to be prominent, and so that embodiment of God energy, which is the feminine, so the Chatan is going to have to circle
The Kala.
the Kala.
That's what they're saying. First, we are dealing with Isha Tesovev Gever, the woman surrounds the male, and then it's Eshet Chayla Teret Bala, and so what is now Malchut becomes Keter, and so all that, so therefore he has to do the circling. That's good,
Right.
but I have
But
a
it doesn't
feeling...
answer the question totally, unless, the people needed because there were so many horrors. I mean, the goddess religions that were prior had a lot of positive, but there was a lot of horrors also, that the women would take, the priestess would take a man as a lover and then she would kill him. And so there was things that were so horrific, so they had to, the male was afraid of the power of this feminine, and so the god of transcendence, so everything was about transcendence, so the male energy is about transcendence, that we have to go beyond the present and connect with the male energy. But sometimes now, as people are more, talking about the rising of the feminine, that I sometimes wonder, if we, and I know in Jewish renewal there's much more of that, and that's of feminizing God, but is that really true to the Kabbalah of the feminine?
Well, there's a big issue about that. One of them is when you're talking to gays and lesbians, we're always in a big deal about the heterosexual symbolism of the Kabbalah. And so people are having tinnitus, can you come up with something else? So I said, I can't. It's not in my experience, and if you gonna do it, then great. I told a number of women, lesbians, why don't you write a Shir HaShirim that would be a lesbian Shir HaShirim, a gay Shir HaShirim for the men. I can't do this because I would, that's what's always so funny about gender equalizing, that we take a function that is a masculine function, but just because politically correct, we put a feminine pronoun to it, so it doesn't have tam. It doesn't sit. So that's the reason why I feel that we can't do much about it. But when it comes to a wedding, sometimes when I talk to people before the chasana, I try and tell them that what the Chachamim have said, that Efshar l'shnei malachim beketer echad, that two kings can't wear one crown, that was a picture of before, because then it was either dominant or submissive, and that's easy. Lots of people can do dominant and submissive, but to do real partnering is such a hard thing. So when Arthur Wasco and Phyllis were getting engaged, I was saying that I wish for you to be able to wear a keter echad, to be able to do that in partnership, because that's much harder. And I don't think that the notion that up to the time when Mashiach will come, that then things are going to reverse completely. I don't think so. I think integration is a lot more.
I think it's a gradual transformation that people are going through now, and this is the direction that they're going.
But then integration is a lot more important than who is going to be. The question that comes up is also in Yerovam ben Nevat. Yerovam was the leader of the people who rebelled against Rechavam, the son of Shlomo HaMelech. He was taking taxes from people that was very, very expensive on them. And so the people complained. So his elders said, listen, your father was building a Beis HaMikdash, he was building the palaces, he needed to start the army. Eretz Yisrael was in those days, in Shlomo HaMelech's time, Take, Mina Nahar Gadol Nahar Parat, all the way to the Nile, Leave him alone, don't ask him for more taxes. But the young people said, you're just becoming king. If you're going to give in to those crutches, your kingdom is going to be nothing. So Yerovam ben Nevat comes up and he says, so what have you made up your mind? So he says, if my father hit you with whips, I will hit you with cats of 9 tails, which is like, you will have to pay, for me you'll have to pay even more taxes. So Yerovam ben Nevat takes off his coat and rips it into 2, and the smaller part he throws at him, and he takes the other 10 tribes with him. So the Midrash says before that happened, God says to Yerovam ben Nevat, don't go so hard. So he says, Ani uben David, Ani ve'ata ben David, nehalech began Eden. He says the 3 of us are going to walk together in Gan Eden. He's showing him an integration. Yerovam ben Nevat says, Mi berosh. And from that moment on, Yerovam ben Nevat became a Mesit to Madiach, and the thing broke. So you get the sense of integration versus domination. I just want to finish a few things here.
Can I ask really quickly, how is that integration reflected in the circling? Do you think that in a chatuna it should still be the kala circling 7 times, or do you play with it?
I've had couples who insisted that the chosn should walk also. I've seen some people where they have done 6 turns each around the other. And if they want to make those turns, I say that the kala should go clockwise and the chatan should go counterclockwise. Because kala means going up and chatan means going down, and the
So they do it at the same time?
Huh?
So you have...
It's very confusing if you do it sequentially, but then there comes this, some people have done the last one, they just turn
do this together
and turn around each other. I tell you what, for me the important thing is that the couple should really feel that they're wedded together, and if they have this idiosyncratic Geschäften that they need to have that, L'chaim Shalom. Kol zman I can, whatever I can accommodate halachically, I'm ready to accommodate. Gesundheit. Why? Because it's, a wedding has to happen on many levels. It's not only on the physical level. And so I warned them, if you want me to do the wedding, I'll make it hassle-proof. Which means that you'll have your hassles, and nevertheless, after all the hassles, you are going to be still married to each other. But if you don't have a hassle-proof wedding, at the first hassles, they break apart. So if it's only in the world of Asiya, then it doesn't have cement to hold it together, so whatever they want. The big other question that he's trying to deal with is והאומרים כי דיבור אנוכי אינו מעשרת הדיברות בזה נחלקו, יש אומרים לא יהיה לך הוא הדיבור הראשון והשני לא תעשה לך פסל, וזה אינו נכון כי מעניין אחד הוא זה וזה. בין בסתר, בין בגלוי, בין באמונת הלב, בין במעשה. והנה בדיבור זכור אתה ובניך וביתך בסתר ובגלוי והכל מצווה אחת. All right, then he goes on to say that how do you deal with lo tachmod? Do you break it into two and so on? So, and you've seen some Catholics will have a different order of the Aseret HaDibrot. They will have the lo tachmod broken into two, and lo yeh lecha, including lo tasa lecha pesel. It's not a separate mitzvah for them in their form of the Ten Commandments.
So how's Tachmod is Eshet Re'echa, and how do they split it?
He goes Beit Re'echa and Eshet Re'echa. Yeah. One other shtickle I found, I'm so excited when I see Ibn Ezra usually is very short. When he says Omar Avraham Schachter-Shalomi, he wants to say something. V'chol ha'am roim et hakolot, on that pasuk. Look later on pasuk Tetvav in Chav, okay? Kvar pirashti tam roim et hakolot. Everybody who is trying to let us know something about how roim et hakolot represents synesthesia. Because they're saying roim et hanishba v'shomim et hanire, so that means the synesthesia. So he says, Kvar pirashti tam roim et hakolot, ki kol hargashot mitchabot el makom echad. You have to know that the sensorium brings it all to one place. V'nei atam kashero hakolot ve'alapidim כי מן האדם שיתפחד מהם וכל השופר שלא נשמע כזה בעולם ואת ההר לבדו השן כאשר ראו הפלאים האלה נעו כמו נע ונט they moved back שכל אחד שר ממקום מעמדו ושב אחורנית וכמו ויניעו אמות הסיפים וטעם אמות שהסיפים שרו ממקום אמות that they moved by cubits לא יכול הנביא לשרם במערת הנבואה, ואומר כי פירושו כמו זהו, לא ייתכן כי זהים כי שרו ממקומם, and they were far. Then he goes on and I don't see this here, I thought I had copied that out too, where he says there's a difference between seeing, and he says,
Doing it.
Huh?
Doing it.
Yeah. Gotta find it. Where he says that in seeing, Shomer Hakolot, right? Let's see over here. No, that's not over there. He wants to say that, that's so nice to hear him say, if you see lightning, you see it right away, whereas it takes time for the coal to come through the avir. And I wanted to show that to you because it is so...
Like the sonic booms you hear in Israel all the time.
Huh?
Like the sonic booms you hear in Israel all the time.
He wants to say that about... No, I can't find it. This is the problem. That I didn't underline it. Let me see. No. Anyway, so good. We'll leave this for today, and Yeah. Tomorrow morning.
It's my bar mitzvah pasha.
Oh, my.
Oh.
In fact, today's my Hebrew birthday.
Mazel tov. So we made your Mishaberach
Yeah,
yesterday.
you did. Thank you.
What an honor to have that as your passion.
That's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bis 120 gesunde Jahr.
Amen.
Yom Holedet Sameach. Yom Holedet Sameach. Yom Holedet Sameach. Yom Holedet Sameach. How many years?
Too many.
Huh?
41.
41, that's wonderful. It's wonderful. You're just coming into...
Now you can start to learn Kabbalah.
Yeah, here's your permission.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reb Zalman.
Yeah, tomorrow morning I'm going to go to Aish, Yis Hashem,
yay.
because Reb Shalom Brod
Yeah.
is coming to town, and
Yeah,
he's
he's-
a buddy of mine from way back.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
I might try and walk down there for the Sudah Shlishit.
Uh-huh. It's a good mahalach. You'll work off the cholent.
Yeah, exactly.